So at the level 4, here we're talking about the business impact. So again, the objectives you might set are that, for example, you want to see increased sales of 5%, say, growth in the market share of 3%, increased upsell of services to yield a further £25 million worth of revenue, whatever is appropriate to the organisation. And it doesn't always have to be numbers as well. It could be actual savings or efficiencies that are going to help and impact on the business from a cost perspective, but it's not always about the upside or the increase in sales. What do you then do, and this is where the model I think is very clever and very simple, is that you take all of the data, the sales analysis, the figures, to demonstrate the financial improvements that have resulted. But what you can't do necessarily is to put all of the benefits of everything purely down to the event. You have to realise that for the organisation, there's probably been sales leaflets or advertising or other means by which the organisation has been talking to the customer base. So not everything can be attributed to the event. So how do you isolate out the benefits or the effects from the other forms of communication to that from the event? Well, here the model, I think, gets across all of the economic metric modelling and other forms of analysis that is required. And very simply, what it does is get the stakeholders into a room together. So you might get your marketing director, your communications director, your PR director, whatever it might be, all the key stakeholders, and say, look, we recognise that every aspect of every communication element or marketing element has made a benefit. Let's look to isolate out the effect of the event from the other forms of communication. And during that sort of forum, each of the stakeholders will result in a figure, which will be a percentage, as to the benefit that the event has delivered, isolated out from the other forms of communication. And if you achieve that within that forum, then that really will be agreed within the organisation itself. So you have a figure, and we'll look at that in a moment as to how you then use that to calculate the return on investment. And then the final level 5, is the actual ROI itself. And that's the return on investment from the event. Now, for example, if you set your objective to be 20%, what you would then do is say the commercial impact, which is the result of going through that phase 4 and isolating out the effect of the event from other forms of marketing and communication, resulted in a business uplift of £240,000. Your event costs were, say, £200,000, so you had a net benefit of £40,000. Take that £40,000, divide it by the event costs, which is 200, and multiply it by 100, and that gives you your 20%, and that is your return on investment. So we've been through the process, we've arrived at the percentage, and I'm now just going to recap on it again, because it is quite difficult to grasp at one take. I think you can do this and learn this and grasp this over a course for a week, or even a day. I'm trying to do this to you in half an hour. So let's just look at those steps again. So first of all, you need to develop all of the meeting objectives, develop against each of those objectives the evaluation plans, collect data before and during the meeting, obviously beforehand, to isolate out any information, knowledge people have on the subjects you're going to discuss at the event. Isolate the effects of the meeting from the other forms of activity. Convert the data into a financial amount. Calculate the costs of the meeting. And very importantly here, you should also include the time costs within the organisation of all of the stakeholders. Now, I was on a sales conference a few weeks ago with and talking to the president of the company and talking indeed about return on investment, and they have no doubt that this particular conference for them delivers them a return, but they also said, for us, you have to factor in the fact we have got our sales force out of the market for a whole week, and that is a considerable cost to us in terms of time and potential sales that they're not getting while they're at the conference. So you must factor those into the process themselves. From that, you can calculate the return on investment like we just did. But I think the other really, really important point here, which I didn't touch on, is the intangible benefits. Now, those are things like staff motivation, like staff retention, There are things like people feeling that they have been challenged by what they've heard, that they're excited about the future of the organisation, that the organisation is somewhere where they want to sort of position themselves as being there for a number of years ahead. It's all of those sort of things that are very, very important, and in their own right, in many cases, the reasons why somebody run an event. So don't forget those, and make sure they, along with the results, get communicated to all of the stakeholders to really make sure that the message has got across that the event has worked and it's delivered a return on investment. So what does it mean for stakeholders? Well, I think I said earlier on, it focuses everyone's minds on what the event is there to achieve. So even if you didn't measure it to that level, if you plan the event and you set the objectives and you evaluate against the objectives, you're going to make sure that everybody in the event is pulling together against the same objectives with the same cause, and that in itself will lead to a much more effective event. If the speakers know that they're being evaluated, it puts pressure on them not just to come up and do a nice presentation and jump up and down, but to really think about their content and make sure that the content delivers against those objectives. And I'm sure we've all seen people come up before a major speaker slot, probably not having rehearsed considerably what they're going to say, and that is a great missed opportunity for their organisations. But if those people know that they're going to be evaluated not on how well they presented or how well they looked, but on how well they got the message across, then the ante is raised for them in terms of making sure they deliver that to everybody. So everyone in the whole team, on all sides of the involvement in the event, has to work to deliver against those objectives, and that in itself ensures a very highly effective event. So putting this into practice, and I think we've been through quite a lot of sort of science here, a lot of stages very quickly, but one of the things I just wanted to sort of get across is that in reality, I don't believe you would need to do an ROI analysis on probably 99% of events. Well, why? Because that process that we went through to go right up to level 5 actually takes a lot of time and is quite an expensive process to go through. Obviously, it is relevant, though, to those companies that run a lot of events or one or two very, very large events where the expenditure is very great. Then yes, of course, that process is worth going through and is going to deliver them information that they can act on themselves. But sometimes, and I remember talking about this to a client not very long ago and said, look, we could go to a certain level of the process, and this particular person turned around to me and said, Mark, we don't need to measure it. We know this event delivers us a return on investment. We know we couldn't do our business without doing this event. So it's not always appropriate for every situation, but it's something that is very, very important to remember and hang on to. I believe you should always try and set objectives to at least level 3, if you can, for every event. Level 2 is an absolute must, and you should always evaluate to at least level 1, and very much ideally 2 or even level 3. And if you start off with those as your sites to aim for, then I think it's a good stepping process to move yourselves up the levels. But start sort of level 1, 2, and perhaps move to 3, and then who knows, move up the tree, as it were, up the pyramid.